we had done the major consequences of resource depletion. In this, we had done 4 points. The first was imbalance in nature. Then the first was imbalance in nature. We discussed 4 points in this. That is how resource depletion causes an imbalance in nature. The first one was how human activities are disturbing the ecological balance, and how the climate and the temperature is changing, then how climatic changes are affecting various things, and then things like soil erosion, floods, droughts, etc. Then we talked about shortage of materials, that as resources get depleted, we have shortage of materials, right? How the non-renewable things, resources, they take a lot of time to replenish themselves, and we keep using them very rapidly. All right. We keep using them rapidly, and while they take thousands of years to form. So we are having a shortage of material. Then there is struggle for existence between humans and animals. And most of the time what happens, humans win. And this leads to extinction of the various species of animals. Then slackening of economic growth. We talked about how resource depletion affected the economic growth of a country, because we have less of resources and materials. So we are not able to produce much, and we're not able to export, and it affects the economy of the country. Then moving on to some other effects related to depletion of resources, right? So what are some of the other effects? First one we will talk about is removal of topsoil. You know how important the top layer of the soil, the layer that contains humus, how important is that layer, right? The topsoil is the upper layer of the soil, which is most productive and fertile. Because of this layer of soil, the land is able to produce crops, right? If this topsoil, if this layer of soil is washed away, then the land becomes infertile and it cannot grow any crops, right? So this topsoil is important for agricultural productivity and growth of vegetation, right? Topsoil may be removed due to deforestation, faulty agricultural practices, runoff due to heavy rain, construction activities, etc. So whenever mining is done or construction activities are take place, then what happens that this topsoil gets affected. Or if we cut down the trees, now there is nothing to hold the soil in place, and whenever rain it rains, what happens that due to runoff, that is when the rainwater is flowing over this land, it takes away the topsoil along with it. And so what happens that topsoil is removed and the land becomes infertile and barren. All right. Then the second point is deforestation. Deforestation results in rise in temperature, right? You know that the trees, they regulate the climate, right? The trees regulate the climatic conditions, they regulate rainfall, they regulate the temperature. So what happens when deforestation occurs, now there are less of trees, what happens, it results in rise in temperature and less of rainfall. Why? Because due to less transpiration. Transpiration term you must have studied in bio, right? Where the while the plants breathe, they lose water, right? Every time they breathe, they lose some amount of water. This water, rises up and forms the clouds. So it cools down the temperature as well. So now, due to less transpiration, there is less rainfall and more. There is rise in temperature. Then soil erosion. Soil erosion takes place because there are no trees to hold the soil. Then obviously there is decrease in forest productivity. When forest is not there, how will there be forest productivity? Forest productivity refers to the resources that we obtain from forest, the produce that we have from the forest resources, right? Then there is loss of habitat. There is loss of habitat of the animals, right? For a large number of species of flora and fauna. All right, so all these problems occur in just by just deforestation, right? Then desertification. Desertification, do you understand? Desertification is rendering of a land infertile, right? When a land loses its fertility due to various reasons and it is no longer able to grow vegetation on it, then what happens? That it becomes desertified, or we say that now this desertification has taken place. This land is almost similar to a desert, right? It is desert like condition. So if you are asked that what is desertification, you're going to say this: it is the desert like condition created due to soil pollution, soil erosion, intensive cultivation, salination. Underline all of this: salination of soil due to excessive addition of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. All right. So what is desertification? Desertification is desert-like condition which is created by all these reasons. So if you are now asked that what are the reasons of desertification or what are the causes that lead to desertification, you can give all these reasons. That is soil pollution, right? If you are asked that what are the reasons of desertification, then you can list soil pollution, soil erosion, intensive cultivation, and salination of soil. All right, what do you mean by salination of soil? When salt gets accumulated on land, right? Due to overuse of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, what happens that when excess of chemical fertilizers and pesticides are sprayed on the crops, what some of it gets absorbed by the crops, the other stays on the that is surface, that is it stays in the soil. So slowly these salt keep accumulating with the time, and a time comes when, because of the excess of the salt in soil, the soil is no longer able to grow crops. All right. So this is known as salination, where due to excess of salt, the soil is not able to grow crops. It loses its fertility. That is known as salination of soil. Underline salination of soil and write this much. That is when due to excess or the excess of salt leading to infertility of soil. All right. Then there is no scope of growth of any vegetation on such land until soil conditioning is done. So then soil conditioning needs to be done. Otherwise, the soil is not able to produce any vegetation. Then the fourth point is depletion of groundwater. The water that seeps into the ground is very important water resource. Like whenever it rains, all of this water seeps into the ground, it is absorbed and it gets stored under the soil, right? So there are spaces, they get filled up with water, and this is known as water table. And it is a very important source of water, especially in the areas that have no rivers and lake around, right? Especially in cities like over here also, even though we have rivers, two rivers passing through our city, still most of the areas in our city depend on underground water, right? You must have heard about submersible machines. So they are placed under the ground and they pump up the water, and they pump this water out, and we use this water, right? So it is a source of drinking water for the cities with no water bodies nearby, right? This water fills up, even cities with a water resource nowadays depend on it. Why? Because the water of the rivers is not that clean anymore, right? We cannot drink unprocessed river water. If we try to take up the river water just like this and drink it, can we drink it? We cannot drink the river water now, right? So for drinking, we totally depend on, for drinking water, we totally depend on these underground water bodies only, right? This underground water. This water fills up the space in the aquifer. Aquifer are spaces under the soil right? If you dig a bit deep into the ground, there are spaces that hollow spaces that get filled with water. These are known as aquifers, and they contain this underground water. All right, they are also known as underground water tables. All right, if you want, you can write it down. They are also known as underground water tables. All right, they contain this underground water, and we pump this out using submersible machines, right? Pumps, and we drink this water. So, excessive use of this underground water for fulfilling the needs of growing population and irrigation not only depletes it, but there is also danger of caving in of the ground due to the vacuum created by depletion of water. So, what happens when we pump excess of water, right? More than we should, what happens? All of the water gets, two things happen. First of all, that all of the water gets used up and the underground water table is depleted. And what is the other thing? I told you that they are hollow spaces and then water gets filled in them. So when the water is pumped out, what happens? A vacuum is created, right? So the soil, it sinks in, right? There is a space below. So what is going to happen? The soil layer that is present above it caves in, it sinks in that hole. Understood? So this also occurs. That is, there is danger of caving in of the ground due to vacuum created by the depletion of water. So in addition to the 4 points that were imbalance in nature, shortage of material, struggle of for existence, and slackening of economic growth, now we have four more consequences then that we can talk about: removal of topsoil, deforestation, desertification, and depletion of groundwater. So you can also use these points in your answer if you want, right? This was about the consequences of resource depletion. Now we are going to talk about that. Fine, resources are getting depleted. These are the harmful effects of that. So what should we do? How do we stop all this, right? So we need to talk about conservation of resources. How can we, save our resources and prevent all of this from happening? So first we talk about use of renewable resources. That is, we need to shift from the non-renewable resources to the renewable ones. So we need to focus less on the fossil fuels and focus more on solar power, wind energy, tidal energy, geothermal energy, as it not only reduces the pollution but also saves the non-renewable fossil fuels like coal and petroleum. So here we are going to discuss points that are going to help us save our resources from getting depleted. All right. So then use alternate sources of energy like CNG, biogas, biofuels, gas hole, ethanol, hydrogen gas, algal fuel, etc. All right. So these are the resources other than fossil fuels that we can utilize, and they can help us in conservation of fossil fuel and wood as a source of energy in rural areas. Like you must have studied about biogas, how it is generated, right, from waste material and all, right? Biodegradable waste. You have gobar gas now, right? There are plants where this cow dung is fed in the, and then gas is, the gas that comes out is trapped, and that can also be used as a fuel. So we can take up these alternatives, and so that the pressure on the fossil fuel is reduced. So consider these 2 points as one. All right. Why? Because in both of the points, we talk about alternative resources to fossil fuels, right? So consider it as one. Then using biofertilizers and biopesticides instead of chemicals will prevent degradation of soil and even stop contamination of groundwater. So instead of using chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides, we should be using biofertilizers and biopesticides, so that the salination of soil also does not occur. And these chemical fertilizers, when they seep into the ground, they pollute underground water. So that also does not happen, because these biofertilizers are not harmful and they are also biodegradable, right? They degrade and they mix into the soil and everything is good there, right? The soil is also not polluted and the water is also not polluted, not contaminated, right? So everything is good in that situation. Then stop all activities leading to deforestation. Do not carry out deforestation. You stop deforestation as much as you can. Prevent it, right? Start a forestation program. Deforestation is cutting down of trees. Afforestation is planting more trees. So we need to plant more trees. We need to start afforestation programs in cities, rural areas, and forests. Social forestry, agroforestry must be carried out. All right. So agroforestry is like where you practice agriculture along with, where you conduct agriculture in the forest areas also, in a way you do not adversely affect the forests, right? Then we need to stop soil erosion by not allowing cutting of trees and control overgrazing. So these, I think 4 and 5 points you can consider it as one. That is, we need to stop deforestation and we need to start afforestation, right? So you can consider it as one. Then stop unnecessary wastage of water and water pollution. So we need to stop, uh, you know, water resource depletion. That is, we need to conserve water. Then trickle drip irrigation and using recycled water for irrigation. So this is just a way where we can prevent wastage of water. So again, you can take it up as 1 point while writing your answer, right? That we need to stop unnecessary wastage. And how can we do that? We can use trickle drip irrigation. We are not just taking a pipe and turning it on, and then water is flowing into the farms and going on, flooding the farms, right? We do not need to do that. We need to be very wise in while irrigating our crops, and prevent water wastage in that. Then use of carpool or public transport, use of 4R policy of refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle to reduce wastage. So about this concept, we are going to study later on in our waste chapter, right? The chapter related to the waste. So don't worry about it. Still, you have a brief idea about it, I think, right? Refusing would mean that refuse a thing that you do not require. Do not buy it just out of a habit, right? Then reduce producing waste. All right, utilize a thing to its maximum capacity. Reuse means reusing a thing again, like you can use cold drink water bottles at your homes, right? Don't just throw them away, right? You can use instead of a plastic bag, you can use a cloth bag, so that you can continue using it again and again, right? Plastic bags you use once and you throw, but cloth bags can be used again and again. So the concept of reuse, and then the concept of recycling, you've been studying previously also. You have studied, that is, we recycle some of the products like plastic, tin, and all, right? They are melted and then reshaped into a new thing. Recycling of paper is done, right? So this policy of the 4R should be taken up more and more. Then rainwater harvesting is an old age method of water conservation. Rainwater is collected in traditional rainwater harvesting systems like johads, kunds, tankas, temple ponds, etc., or modern rooftop water harvesting system. So water harvesting should be taken up, where the when rain pours down, we store this rainwater and not allow it to flow into the drains and nalas and all, right? So we need to conserve it. How can we conserve it? Like at our on our rooftops, we can have a system where the water that collects at our rooftop, it gets drained through a pipe which is fitted underground. Tanks are created underground, and those pipes lead this water into those tanks, and then this can later be pumped out and utilized. All right, so we harvest the rainwater, we conserve the rainwater, we do not allow it to flow into the drains just like that, right? Then there are certain traditional methods like Johad's Kunds and temple ponds, where small, check dams are kind of created, where they prevent water from flowing away. Like if water is flowing in this direction, they're going to build a kacha dams in the way of the water, right? Kacha dams would mean that water dams, are going to create out of mud, not those cemented ones like you have the large ones, not those, but made out of mud itself, right? So what happens when they obstruct the way of the water gets collected over here, and when it gets collected, it takes time, it gets the time to seep into the ground. And when it seeps into the ground, it gets collected in the underground water tables, which can be utilized later on. Otherwise, it would have flown and, gone off and taken all the topsoil also with it, right? But now this water, because it was stopped midway by these, dams or ponds that were created, it got stored over here. So we can utilize this stored water also, and when it seeps into the ground, then we can utilize that underground water also, right? So these were the ways in which we can conserve our resources. Not only are there these ways, but many more ways, right? So if you have some idea that by this way also we can conserve our resources, and you want to list them in your answers, you are welcome to do that, right? You can very well include your own points, but the points should be reasonable, right? And they should not be just a mere repetition of these points, right? So be very careful about that. And if you want to include some of your points, then you can do that, right? So that is all about the resources, right?